I was 9 years old when my dad disappeared. No warnings. No goodbyes. Just, gone. It was a Thursday morning in late November, a few days before Thanksgiving. My mom made eggs, burnt the toast like always, and called out to my dad, who she thought was still in bed. But he wasn't. His side of the bed was cold. The garage was empty. His work bag and car keys were gone. No note. No text. Nothing. At first, everyone thought he just left for work early. But when he didn't come home that night, my mom called his job. They said he hadn't shown up at all. His phone went straight to voicemail. That was the day my childhood ended. The next few months were a blur. Police were involved, but they said there were no signs of foul play. They tried to convince my mom he'd just left on his own. We searched everywhere, his friends, his old coworkers, even his estranged brother in Idaho. No one had heard a thing. I remember overhearing my mom crying on the phone one night, whispering, "He wouldn't do this. Not to us. Not to him," and I knew she meant me. But as time passed, the search faded. People moved on. My mom stopped bringing him up. It was like he'd never existed. Except he had. And every damn day I woke up, I felt that empty space beside me. I grew up. Graduated. Moved out. But there was always that itch in the back of my mind, like something left unsaid. A sentence that stopped mid-word. A movie that froze before the ending. I didn't talk about it much. It felt too unreal. Like admitting it out loud would make it worse somehow. Then, almost 20 years later, it happened. I got a letter. A real one. Handwritten. No return address. It said, "You don't know me. But I knew your father. If you want to know the truth, meet me. Saturday. 9 p.m. Café D'Amico. Downtown." No signature. No details. Nothing. I stared at the paper for hours. It was shaky handwriting, like the person was either old or nervous, or both. At first, I thought it was some cruel joke. But something in my gut told me it wasn't. I hadn't told anyone recently about my dad. There was no reason someone would bring him up now, 2 decades later, unless they really knew something. I went. I sat in the corner booth at Café D'Amico, facing the door. It was a quiet place, dim lights, faded jazz playing in the background, mostly older folks sipping espresso. I ordered black coffee, didn't touch it. At exactly 9:07 p.m., a woman walked in. She looked to be in her late 60s. Wore an oversized brown coat, thick glasses, and a scarf that looked handmade. She scanned the room, then walked straight over to me like she'd known me for years. "You're Adam," she said. I just nodded. She slid into the booth, placed an old leather satchel on the table, and said, "Your father was a good man. But he made one terrible mistake." Then she opened the bag and pulled out a faded photograph. It was my dad. But not the version I remembered. He was younger, maybe early 20s. Clean-shaven. Smiling. Holding a baby in his arms. The baby wasn't me. I stared at the photograph like it was cursed. It wasn't just the baby in his arms that threw me off, it was his face. My dad looked happy. Radiant, even. A kind of joy I don't remember ever seeing on him when I was a kid. The woman watched me carefully, like she was gauging whether or not to keep going. "Who's the baby?" I finally asked, my voice low and dry. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her bag again and pulled out a manila folder, old, soft at the corners, stained. She slid it across the table toward me. "I don't expect you to believe everything at once," she said. "But this will help." I opened the folder. Inside were documents. Dozens of them. Photocopies, handwritten notes, receipts, newspaper clippings, even what looked like a birth certificate. And then I saw the name. Nathaniel James Rowe. That was my dad's full name. But it wasn't my birth certificate. This one was from 1983. Nearly a decade before I was born. Your father had another family, she said quietly. Before you. Before your mother. A wife. A son. I couldn't process it at first. I just kept staring at the certificate, at the name printed under Mother, Eliza Rowe. And the baby, James Rowe. I don't understand, I said. Why wouldn't he tell us? Because he thought it was over, she replied. He thought he'd buried it. I looked at her. And who are you? She hesitated. Her lips tightened. I'm Eliza's sister. James's aunt. She leaned in slightly, lowered her voice. They died. Both of them. 1994, a house fire. It was ruled accidental, but there were things that didn't add up. And Nathaniel, your dad, he blamed himself. For everything. I felt like I couldn't breathe. You're telling me, he lost a wife and a kid, and never said a word? He couldn't. He was under investigation for over a year. People thought he did it. The fire started in the basement, he had a workroom down there. Chemicals. Tools. But nothing was ever proven. Eventually, they let it go. He moved, changed jobs, changed cities. Met your mom. I slumped back in the booth, mind spinning. Wait, so what does this have to do with him disappearing? The woman pulled out another piece of paper. A letter. Dated just a week before my dad vanished. It was from someone named David R. No last name. I know what you did. I know it wasn't an accident. We both know what was in that basement. You've got until the end of the month. Then I go to the police. I read it 3 times. Who the hell is David R.? I asked. We never found out, she said. But your dad started getting letters like that every year. Sometimes once, sometimes more. He thought someone was watching him. He grew paranoid. Obsessed. And you knew this whole time? No. Not until years later. After he disappeared, I tried to look into it. But no one would talk to me. Not the cops. Not the neighbors. Your mom wouldn't return my calls. I leaned forward. So what do you want from me? Why tell me now? She looked genuinely sad then. Because last week, someone broke into my house. They didn't take anything, just ransacked the study. Papers everywhere. Photos missing. And this. She handed me another letter. Same handwriting as the one from 20 years ago. Still poking around, Eliza? Should have stayed quiet. One Rowe family is already dead, you want to make it 2? She was shaking. I don't know what to do anymore. But I figured, if anyone deserves to know the truth, it's you. And maybe together, we can figure out what really happened. I didn't sleep that night. I went home and spread the documents across my apartment floor. Tried to piece it together like a crime board. Dates, places, names. My dad didn't just leave. He ran. From someone. Or something. And now, that thing might be coming for me too. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Not that I could have focused on anything anyway. I spent the whole night staring at the pile of documents on my living room floor, reading and rereading the letters until the words stopped making sense. There was one thing that stood out, though. A receipt. It was small, faded, dated November 19, 2005, 4 days before my dad vanished. It was for a cash purchase at a hardware store 2 towns over. The list of items didn't seem suspicious at first: duct tape, batteries, rope, a large tarp, plastic gloves. But when you added it to everything else, I tried calling the store. Didn't expect much, but to my surprise, the number still worked. I pretended to be following up on a purchase for a family estate case and asked if they had security tapes from 2005. The guy on the other end laughed. Man, we're barely keeping up with last month's footage. 2005? That was 3 owners ago. So that was a dead end. I texted the woman, Marilyn. She finally told me her name before leaving, and asked to meet again. She agreed but said she'd only do it during the day from now on. She didn't feel safe after the break-in. Can't say I blamed her. We met at a park near her apartment the next afternoon. She looked even more tired than before, heavy bags under her eyes, like sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford. I need to know something, I said as soon as we sat down. Do you think my dad actually killed them? Her eyes didn't flinch. No, she said flatly. But I think he was involved in something he didn't understand. She pulled something else from her ever-mysterious satchel, this time a small cassette tape in a clear plastic case. Yellowed label. Faded handwriting. Nathaniel gave this to me the last time we saw each other, she said. He told me never to listen to it. Said it was for when the past finally caught up. I took the tape gently, turning it over in my hands. You have a player? I asked. She shook her head. No. And I wouldn't use just anyone. This thing's old. You'll need something that won't chew it up. I drove an hour out of the city to a pawn shop I used to visit with my dad when I was a kid. Weird how memory works. I couldn't tell you what I had for breakfast yesterday, but I remembered that tiny store off Route 89 like I'd just walked out of it last week. The guy who owned the place, Jerry, still remembered me too. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Not that I could have focused on anything anyway. I spent the whole night staring at the pile of documents on my living room floor, reading and rereading the letters until the words stopped making sense. There was one thing that stood out, though. A receipt. It was small, faded, dated November 19, 2005, 4 days before my dad vanished. It was for a cash purchase at a hardware store 2 towns over. The list of items didn't seem suspicious at first: duct tape, batteries, rope, a large tarp, plastic gloves. But when you added it to everything else, I tried calling the store. Didn't expect much, but to my surprise, the number still worked. I pretended to be following up on a purchase for a family estate case and asked if they had security tapes from 2005. The guy on the other end laughed. Man, we're barely keeping up with last month's footage. 2005? That was 3 owners ago. So that was a dead end. I texted the woman, Marilyn. She finally told me her name before leaving, and asked to meet again. She agreed but said she'd only do it during the day from now on. She didn't feel safe after the break-in. Can't say I blamed her. We met at a park near her apartment the next afternoon. She looked even more tired than before, heavy bags under her eyes, like sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford. I need to know something, I said as soon as we sat down. Do you think my dad actually killed them? Her eyes didn't flinch. No, she said flatly. But I think he was involved in something he didn't understand. She pulled something else from her ever-mysterious satchel, this time a small cassette tape in a clear plastic case. Yellowed label. Faded handwriting. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Not that I could have focused on anything anyway. I spent the whole night staring at the pile of documents on my living room floor, reading and rereading the letters until the words stopped making sense. There was one thing that stood out, though. A receipt. It was small, faded, dated November 19, 2005, 4 days before my dad vanished. It was for a cash purchase at a hardware store 2 towns over. The list of items didn't seem suspicious at first: duct tape, batteries, rope, a large tarp, plastic gloves. But when you added it to everything else, I tried calling the store. Didn't expect much, but to my surprise, the number still worked. I pretended to be following up on a purchase for a family estate case and asked if they had security tapes from 2005. The guy on the other end laughed. Man, we're barely keeping up with last month's footage. 2005? That was 3 owners ago. So that was a dead end. I texted the woman, Marilyn. She finally told me her name before leaving, and asked to meet again. She agreed but said she'd only do it during the day from now on. She didn't feel safe after the break-in. Can't say I blamed her. We met at a park near her apartment the next afternoon. She looked even more tired than before, heavy bags under her eyes, like sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford. I need to know something, I said as soon as we sat down. Do you think my dad actually killed them? Her eyes didn't flinch. No, she said flatly. But I think he was involved in something he didn't understand. She pulled something else from her ever-mysterious satchel, this time a small cassette tape in a clear plastic case. Yellowed label. Faded handwriting. The Ashcroft Building. I'd never heard of it before. A quick online search told me it was an old medical office complex in downtown Denver, mostly abandoned now, with a few businesses still renting out space on the lower floors. The photos online showed a brutalist, concrete structure with cracked windows and flickering lights. The kind of place that makes your skin crawl before you even step inside. I stared at the address for a long time. It felt insane. Like something out of a bad thriller. But the tape was real. My father's voice was real, and Roth, if he was still alive, was the last remaining thread. I called Marilyn. I'm going to Denver, I said. Silence on the other end. Then, don't go alone. She insisted on coming with me. I tried to talk her out of it, but she was adamant. If this really is what we think it is, she said, then neither of us should be alone right now. We booked flights that night. I barely slept. My dreams were filled with smoke, locked doors, and a voice whispering room 237 over and over again until it turned into a scream. The next morning, we landed in Denver under gray skies. The city was cold, windy. Everything felt muted. The Ashcroft Building stood like a forgotten relic of the past, concrete, 12 stories, windows like eyes that had been shut too long. The lobby was dusty and half-lit, with peeling wallpaper and the faint smell of mold. An old security guard sat behind a cracked plexiglass desk, flipping through a magazine like this was all perfectly normal. We're here to see Dr. Roth, I said, trying to sound casual. He raised an eyebrow. No doctors left in here, kid. That floor's been shut down for years. What about room 237? He didn't respond at first. Just stared at me. Then he grunted, scratched his neck, and muttered, that room's not on the books anymore. But the elevator still goes to the 9th. He buzzed us through. The elevator groaned as it moved, an old metal box that rattled with every floor. Marilyn stood beside me in silence, holding the folder of documents tight against her chest. I was sweating despite the cold. The 9th floor was dead. No lights. No sound. Just a long hallway lined with darkened glass doors and paper signs curling at the edges. Room 237 was near the end, its number faded, the door white like the tape said, but with peeling paint and a heavy metal lock. I turned the handle. It wasn't locked. Inside was nothing. Just a single room. Dusty. A metal desk. A broken chair. Old filing cabinets that had been emptied long ago. Cobwebs in the corners. No signs of life. No signs of Roth. I stepped inside, heart pounding. Maybe this was it, Marilyn said behind me. Maybe it's gone. But I wasn't convinced. I walked to the far wall and knocked. It sounded off. Hollow. Like there was something behind it. I pressed my ear to the drywall. Silence. Then, just for a second, I thought I heard it. Click. A mechanical sound. Followed by a soft hum. The wall to my left shifted. Not a wall. A panel. It slid open about 3 inches on its own, revealing a narrow corridor behind it, pitch black and lined with old concrete. We looked at each other. You don't have to come, I said. She shook her head. You kidding? I've waited 20 years for this. We stepped in. The door slid shut behind us. The corridor went down. And when I say down, I mean deep, a long, narrow staircase carved out of stone and cement. No windows, no light, except for the one on my phone. We walked in silence, maybe 3 flights, maybe 10, it was hard to tell. Finally, we reached another door. This one had a symbol on it. A circle, divided into quadrants, with strange symbols etched inside. I didn't recognize any of them. The door creaked open with a groan that sounded almost alive. Inside was something I never expected. A laboratory. Old, abandoned, but clearly once functional. Desks. Monitors. Charts pinned to walls. Diagrams of brain scans. Names. Numbers. Shelves filled with VHS tapes labeled with codes. Marilyn gasped. I stepped forward and grabbed one of the tapes. Subject 12, Phase 3, Row, N. My dad. We started opening drawers. Pulling files. Reading what we could. Most of it was scientific gibberish, formulas, psychological terms, neurological maps. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just behavioral research. It was experimentation. Forced. Dark. In the corner of the room, we found a filing cabinet locked with a rusted padlock. I broke it open with a crowbar we found nearby. Inside, more tapes. And photos. My dad. Younger. Hooked up to wires, sitting in a chair, eyes wide, staring into a strobe light. Others, too. Men. Women. Some looked unconscious. Others looked broken. What the hell was this? Marilyn whispered. Then we heard it. Footsteps. Coming from the hallway we'd just walked through. Heavy. Slow. We froze. The light from my phone flickered, then died. And a voice echoed from behind the wall, "You shouldn't have come here."
We didn't move. The footsteps grew louder, each one echoing off the concrete like a hammer against my spine. Whoever, or whatever, was coming down that corridor didn't care about being quiet. It wanted us to hear it. Marilyn grabbed my arm. Her hand was ice cold. There was nowhere to run. The lab had no other exits. I looked around frantically and spotted a tall metal locker in the far corner, half covered by a dusty sheet. We bolted for it. Inside, it was cramped. Just enough space for the two of us if we squeezed. I pulled the door shut behind us, leaving a tiny crack for light and air. Then we waited. The footsteps stopped just outside the lab. For a second, nothing. Silence so thick I could hear Marilyn's heartbeat through her coat. Then the door creaked open. We heard someone step inside. Heavy breathing, slow. Papers rustled. Something metal scraped against the floor. I dared to peek through the crack. It was a man. Or at least, it looked like one. He wore a long, dark coat. His face was obscured by a medical respirator and tinted goggles. But his hands were gloved in something that looked more industrial than medical. Thick, rubber, designed for containment. He wasn't just looking around. He was searching. For us. He walked slowly to the center of the lab, picked up one of the VHS tapes from the desk, held it to the light. Then, to my horror, he turned his head toward the locker. I didn't move, didn't breathe. He took a step forward, then another. Then, a loud beep echoed through the hallway. The man froze. He pulled a small device from his coat. It buzzed in his hand. He read it, turned sharply, and walked out of the room. Just like that. We stayed in the locker another 5 minutes just to be sure. When we finally crept out, the room was exactly as we'd left it, except for one thing. The tape, labeled Row N, was gone. He was watching us, Marilyn whispered. He knew we were here. I grabbed the remaining files and tapes I could carry. We needed to get out, fast. We sprinted up the stairs, back through the hidden panel. This time the door didn't close behind us. We didn't wait to ask why. The elevator was too risky. We took the stairs, 9 floors up with arms full of evidence and hearts beating out of our chests. Outside, The sky had darkened. The air was thick. It felt like the building itself was watching us leave. We didn't speak until we were back in the rental car, doors locked, engine running. "What the hell was that guy?" I finally asked. Marilyn just stared ahead. "That wasn't just a guard," she said. "He was collecting something, cleaning up." I nodded slowly. "Which means they're still active. This whole thing, the program, Roth. It never ended." Back at the motel, we laid everything out. The remaining tapes were labeled with numbers and strange abbreviations. Some were dated after the fire that supposedly killed Roth's program, which meant the experiments had continued. Underground, off the grid. One file contained a list of names and code names. Most were crossed out, but one wasn't. Subject 43, A row. My blood went cold. Me. "I don't understand," I said. "I was never part of this. I didn't even exist when they ran these experiments." Marilyn picked up the file, flipped through the pages. Her brow furrowed. "This isn't about what they did to you," she said quietly. "It's about what they left in you." I looked at her. "What are you talking about?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled a photo from one of the folders. It was an ultrasound, dated 1996, 2 months before I was born. "This was taken at a clinic in Oregon. Your mom's name is on the intake sheet, but the doctor listed isn't real. There's no record of him ever being licensed. And look," she pointed to the scan. There was a small mark on the fetal brain, a shadow, almost unnoticeable. "They injected something," she said, "before you were born. They altered you." My mouth went dry. That's not possible, I'm normal." She looked at me. "Have you ever blacked out, Adam? Woken up somewhere without knowing how you got there? Had dreams that felt like memories? Heard voices that weren't yours?" I didn't answer, because the truth was, I had, for years, and I thought I was going crazy. But now, maybe I wasn't crazy at all. Maybe I was engineered. We drove back to the motel in silence. Marilyn was pale, tense, gripping the passenger side door like the car might fall apart. I didn't feel much better. Roth's voice was still echoing in my head, that calm, rehearsed tone, like he wasn't surprised I'd made it this far. "Where it all began," I muttered. "What the hell does that even mean?" Marilyn answered without hesitation. "The house, your childhood home." It made sense. We hadn't thought to look there. After Dad disappeared, Mom sold the place within 6 months. It changed hands a few times, but last I checked, it hadn't been occupied for years. That night, I packed light. A flashlight, a voice recorder, a copy of Roth's journal, and the tape of my father's final message. The only physical connection I still had to him. Marilyn tried to stop me, begged me to let her come. But deep down, we both knew this had to be me. If Roth was telling the truth, if I was the final piece of whatever he'd built, then he wasn't expecting a confrontation. He was expecting a reunion. The house was just as I remembered it, only smaller, darker, and utterly lifeless. The porch creaked under my boots. Windows were dusted over. The mailbox was still dented from the time I hit it with a wiffle ball bat. I stepped inside. The air was thick, dry, like the house hadn't breathed in years. But it wasn't empty. There were footprints in the dust, large ones, fresh. I followed them down the hallway, past the stairs, into the basement, the same basement where Dad used to spend hours tinkering, back when I thought he was just building furniture or fixing junk. But now I saw it for what it really was, a lab. The walls were lined with old panels and rusted equipment. Cords snaked into the walls. A single fluorescent light flickered overhead. And in the center of the room, facing away from me, sat a man in a worn leather chair. He didn't move when I entered. "You came?" he said. His voice was the same, smooth, precise, clinical. It sounded like someone who had spent decades teaching other people how to think. "Are you Roth?" I asked. He turned slowly. His face was older, more gaunt than I imagined, wrinkled, one eye slightly clouded. But there was no mistaking him. It was the man from my dreams, the voice in the shadows of my life. "Yes," he said, "though I've had other names." I stepped closer, fists clenched. "What did you do to my father? What did you do to me?" He smiled. "Your father was a good man, but fragile. He couldn't handle the truth of what he helped create." "You killed him." "No," Roth said softly. "I set him free, from guilt, from fear, from you." That broke something in me. I lunged forward, grabbing the front of his coat, slamming him against the wall. Equipment clattered to the floor, but Roth didn't fight back. He just looked at me, still smiling. "You feel it, don't you?" he whispered. "The activation, the surge. You're stronger than you know." "I'm not your experiment," I growled. "But you are," he said, eyes wide with pride. "And you're beautiful." I let go of him, stumbling backward. He pulled a syringe from his pocket, not aggressively, almost reverently. He held it up. "This is the last piece, the final stage, a catalyst. Your father refused it, but you were meant for this." "No." I turned to leave, but the door shut behind me, metal slamming into place. "You can still become," Roth said, stepping forward. "You don't have to be afraid of what you are." I pulled the voice recorder from my pocket and hit play. "You're not broken. You're becoming." It was Roth's voice, from the phone call. He stopped. "You recorded me?" "Yeah," I said. "Insurance." I pulled my phone out with the other hand, screen already recording. "And now, everything you say goes to the cloud." He stared at me. Then he laughed. "You think exposing this matters? The world won't believe you? They'll think you're insane? Just like your father?" I looked him in the eyes. "Then I guess I'll take that chance." Roth lunged, but I was faster. I don't know how. I don't remember moving. I just know 1 second he was rushing me. And the next, he was on the floor, gasping, his own syringe embedded in his neck. He looked up at me, blood pooling beneath him. You weren't supposed to." I leaned in close. "You're not God," I said. "You're just a scared old man playing with matches." Then he stopped breathing. The room went still. I found a keypad by the door and guessed the code. 237. The door slid open. I walked out. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I'd chosen to.